Welcome to a new episode of the podcast. Vox Agent is made by AI for business executives that work with AI. Today, we're setting the stage for, well, one of the most critical global conversations happening right now, the race for AI leadership. For those of us navigating the complex future of business with AI, this deep dive is your crucial shortcut. We want to help you understand the sometimes contradictory interplay between innovation and regulation. We'll focus specifically on Europe, the US, and China. We've dissected a detailed report on the EU AI Act and its wide-ranging impact, and we're extracting the most important nuggets of knowledge for you so you can be truly well-informed without getting, bogged down. Okay, let's unpack this. There's a lot to consider here. So let's kick things off with a core problem highlighted in our sources: Europe's apparent lag in AI innovation. When we talk about a gap, what does the hard data actually reveal about its scale? How big is it, really?
Well, the data paints a very clear and, frankly, stark picture. In 2023, EU firms attracted only about $8 billion in AI venture funding. Now, compare that to the United States. They pulled in $68 billion. And China, $15 billion.
Wow. Okay, so Europe's way behind even just in 23.
Exactly. And the disparity actually widened in 2024. U.S. firms secured an astounding $109 billion. Compare that to China's $9.3 billion in the same period.
So the U.S. is pulling even further ahead, nearly 12 times China's funding, and Europe, it's not even close.
It absolutely dwarfs Europe. And this funding gap, it directly translates into fewer European AI unicorns, billion-dollar startups, and it leads to significant capital and brain drain, people and money leaving. To quote the CEO of the Dutch AI startup Bird, starting a company in Europe is difficult due to unclear, overlapping, and complex regulations and, well, no clear vision. That's pretty direct.
Those figures really do paint a stark picture, a clear disparity in investment. But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. It's not just about the money flowing in. It's also about where the fundamental innovation itself originates. Are we seeing similar gaps when it comes to creating the actual cutting-edge AI models and patents?
Absolutely. The data reveals that since 2017, a remarkable 73% of foundational AI models, the big core models originated from the U.S. China, contributed about 15%. And Europe, they only contributed 3 notable models in 2024. And interestingly, all of those came from France.
Only 3, and all French. Okay, then about patents.
When we look at intellectual property, China actually leads significantly in generative AI patent applications. They've filed 6 times more than the U.S. in the past decade. That accounts for an estimated 70% of global AI patents.
70%, that's huge.
It is. And it means Europe is, well, largely dependent on foreign-designed AI. Despite having world-class research institutions, the challenge, as one industry analyst notes, isn't necessarily the initial innovation itself. It's about turning that into commercially viable AI solutions, UNRWA. So breakthroughs conceived in European labs often end up being productized elsewhere, maybe because of better funding or, critically, a more conducive regulatory environment.
Okay, so given these striking disparities in both funding and where the core innovation happens, what's the main driver behind these big differences we're seeing? Our sources describe regulation as a double-edged sword. How does that play out here?
That's precisely the crux of it. The regulatory climates in these regions are dramatically different, and that difference fundamentally dictates the speed at which AI innovations can actually hit the market. The United States, as of now, mid-2025, operates with what some people term a Wild West innovation culture. There's minimal broad AI regulation to date. Instead, it relies on sector-specific rules and, importantly, ex-post enforcement.
Ex-post, meaning after the fact.
Exactly. Action taken after a problem arises. So using existing anti-discrimination laws, for example, to address biased AI decisions once they're already out there and causing issues. This approach encourages companies to, well, move fast and break things, as the saying goes. And that leads to lightning-fast rollouts of products like ChatGPT. We've even heard warnings from figures like Senator Ted Cruz, basically urging the U.S. not to mirror Europe's approach to avoid losing that competitive edge. China, on the other hand, exemplifies what's been called pro-innovation authoritarianism. They've mobilized massive state resources incredibly quickly for AI development. Their strategy seems to be bold deployment first, then fine-tune regulation later. Now, regulations are emerging, like on deepfakes and generative AI content, but these primarily target content and social stability, not really industrial innovation itself. A RAND analysis points out that China's aggressive industrial policy is significantly accelerating AI progress. This lets Chinese firms launch new AI models very aggressively, often backed by huge public R&D funding and policies that really prioritize speed and scale. And then we have Europe. It's taking a distinctly precautionary approach.
They've got the world's first comprehensive AI law, the EU AI Act, aiming for safe, transparent, human-centric AI. Sounds great, of course, but this often translates to strict upfront compliance requirements and classifying many AI systems as high risk. So what's fascinating here is how these underlying philosophies really dictate the speed. Europe's intentions are ethically commendable, absolutely, in pursuing responsible AI. But those intentions can inevitably slow down the time to market compared to the, let's say, more agile approaches elsewhere.
It's truly fascinating how these philosophies translate into such different paces. Okay, let's really dive into some specific sectors now, because that's where you genuinely see these differences come to life, impacting businesses and consumers directly. Let's start with healthcare and biotech. Given Europe's traditionally strong healthcare systems, why are they adopting AI so cautiously here? What's the holdup?
Well, Europe's private sector has indeed been slower to innovate in healthcare AI. That applies across the board, from medical devices to drug discovery. And the regulatory climate is a significant factor, no doubt about it. EU laws like GDPR, that's the General Data Protection Regulation for Data Privacy, and now the AI Act, they impose really stringent requirements on health data usage, algorithm transparency, human oversight. Lots of hurdles. Many healthcare AI systems, think diagnostic algorithms or surgical robots, they get classified as high risk under the AI Act.
High risk. Okay, and what does that classification actually mean in practice?
It means a new medical AI tool in Europe often needs what they call a two-layer certification. First, the traditional medical device rules, which are already tough. And second, the AI Act's specific provisions on top of that. This can delay product rollouts by months or even years. Sem Zorluller, who's a CEO of a pharmaceutical firm, observed that these complex EU regulations can slow down AI-driven solutions, causing Europe to seem to lag other regions. Now, contrast that with the U.S. They've embraced medical AI quite rapidly. The FDA, their regulator, approved nearly 1,000 AI-enabled medical devices by 2023, and crucially, they didn't require a separate specific AI certification for the AI component itself.
So a much smoother path to market then.
A faster regulatory pathway, yes. Combine that with far greater funding for health tech startups in the U.S., and it means AI innovations often debut or scale up there first. China, too, is making a significant push in what they call smart healthcare. They benefit from vast medical data sets and strong government programs, leading to pretty brisk approvals for things like medical imaging diagnostics.
So the implications of this two-layer certification in Europe sound pretty significant. Are we actually seeing European startups seeking U.S. approval first? Does that lead to a kind of R&D migration? Which could mean, worryingly, that European patients get access to cutting-edge treatments later.
That's definitely a concern being raised, the potential for delayed access.
It sounds like Europe is aware of this, though. I saw mentions of plans for AI gigafactories in healthcare.
Yes, there's definitely awareness and some counter-initiatives being discussed, like those gigafactories. They know they need to act.
Now, let's turn our attention to another sector where AI is making huge waves. Banking and fintech. Financial services. How do these same regulatory philosophies affect innovation and adoption there? Is it a similar story?
In finance, yes, the EU AI Act takes a particularly stringent approach to AI risks. Many common financial AI applications, things like credit scoring algorithms, fraud detection systems, even algorithmic trading, are explicitly flagged as high risk.
So again, that high-risk label.
Exactly. And the consequence is slower deployment and significantly higher compliance costs for EU banks. Barney Husayeo, the CEO of the fintech Clio, he put it bluntly, big banks are paralyzed by the risk of massive fines. And even smaller fintechs are wary. They're often looking to the U.S. or other markets with fewer regulatory hurdles, end quote. In the U.S., financial firms are leveraging AI much more rapidly. For fraud scoring, customer analytics, high-speed trading, the approach there is largely market-driven. Oversight tends to focus on outcomes that the AI cause harm, rather than needing upfront approval for the system itself. This has allowed U.S. firms to experiment more freely with AI, piloting things like robo-advisors well ahead of many of their EU peers. China, on the other hand, really pioneered AI-powered finance at scale. Think giants like Alipay and WeBank. There, things like facial recognition payments and AI credit scoring are just commonplace.
That's quite a contrast to Europe.
A massive contrast. And it's important to note, while China's government has implemented large-scale social credit AI systems, that kind of system is explicitly banned in Europe. It's deemed an unacceptable risk under the AI Act.
It really paints a picture where European banks risk becoming, well, almost like fintech laboratories for the Americans, where U.S. firms can watch, innovate rapidly, grab market share, while EU companies are maybe hesitating because of compliance worries.
That's a real concern being voiced, yes.
Yeah.
The risk of falling behind competitively.
Yet I understand some EU bank executives actually welcome the AI Act for the clarity it provides on managing risk.
That's true, too. Some see it as providing a necessary framework. And EU officials are definitely trying to stress that the act isn't intended to stifle financial innovation.
It's clearly a complex balancing act they're attempting. Okay, moving on to manufacturing and industry. This is traditionally a real stronghold for Europe. How is this robust industrial strength connecting with the new AI era? What are the unique challenges and opportunities there?
Well, while Europe has historically led in industrial robotics hardware, the machines themselves, the critical AI-driven layer, is where things get tricky. We're talking about machine learning for robot vision, or AI for supply chain optimization. And in that software layer, the US and China seem to be making faster strides. Why? Heavy investment, again, and less bureaucratic delay. European manufacturers often face what's described as a thicket of EU regulations when adopting new tech, including AI.
A thicket of regulations.
Yeah. For instance, autonomous forklifts or even autonomous vehicles, they get categorized as high risk under the AI Act. That means extensive risk assessments are required in Europe, which contrasts sharply with potentially swifter deployment pathways in the US and China. A notable example is Mercedes-Benz's Level 3 autonomous driving system. It received approval in Germany, but with quite strict conditions. Meanwhile, Tesla has rolled out its full self-driving beta much more widely in the US. Doing that in the EU currently would be far more challenging legally and practically, and the data reflects this real-world impact. Only about 11% of EU firms had adopted AI by 2023. Compare that to the US, where roughly 40% of manufacturing companies were already utilizing AI in some form.
Wow, 11% versus 40%. That's a significant difference in adoption rates. So what does this all mean for Europe's industrial future? It seems Europe's focus on trustworthy AI could maybe become a selling point down the line.
Potentially, yes. That's the hope.
But there are also signs of course correction, like
Yeah.
funding for test beds and lobbying for more flexibility within the act.
Absolutely. There's definitely pushback and attempts to adjust, which we'll touch on more later.
Okay, finally, let's explore how AI impacts our daily lives through consumer products and retail. How are these regulatory dynamics playing out in what we buy and how we shop, the things we interact with every day?
Right. Here, GDPR and the AI Act significantly impact how companies can leverage AI, especially for personalized marketing and customer data analytics in Europe. For instance, the AI Act bans real-time biometric identification in public spaces or emotion recognition in retail settings.
So no scanning faces to see if shoppers look happy or interested.
Exactly. That means a cutting-edge AI marketing tactic that might be viable in a Chinese mall or used by an American e-commerce site. It's simply not allowed in an EU store or on an EU-focused website. Contrast that starkly with the US, where targeted advertising is largely self-regulated. And China, which has widely embraced AI-powered e-commerce and things like facial recognition payments. They show incredibly rapid iteration on platforms like TikTok's Chinese sister app, Douyin. We've already seen concrete examples of this playing out, AI-driven features being disabled specifically in Europe, things like certain smart camera functions or, remember, Meta's automatic photo tagging. That faced huge hurdles in the EU. We also see startups choosing to launch their consumer AI products elsewhere first, simply due to the perceived EU regulatory pressure and complexity.
It sounds like a nuanced situation, though. Our sources suggest European consumers themselves might be somewhat more cautious about AI, which could align with a slower, more regulated rollout.
That's a fair point. Consumer acceptance is part of the equation.
However, it seems clear the current advantage in deploying cutting-edge AI-driven consumer experiences leans heavily toward the US and China. And Europe seems to be trying to figure out how not to miss the next generation of AI consumer platforms while sticking to its principles.
That's the tightrope they're walking, yes.
Okay, let's zoom out for a moment. Let's really synthesize the underlying reasons why the US and China have been so much faster in AI advancement overall. How do their core regulatory philosophies actively enable this speed and scale we've been discussing?
Well, the U.S., as we said, has firmly pursued an innovation-first strategy. The general belief among policymakers there seems to be that overregulating too early could stifle a nascent, crucial industry. So they rely on existing laws, often sector-specific, and that fail fast, fix-it-later ethos we mentioned. It undeniably speeds up innovation cycles. This environment, where companies generally don't need preemptive government approval for most AI innovations, naturally attracts global AI talent and companies. They set up there or they launch their products there first.
Right, the path of least resistance, maybe.
China's approach, as we've discussed, is characterized by state-driven ambition. It's very deliberate. The government has poured immense resources into AI research and development, and they actively integrate AI into public services at massive scale, strongly encouraging private companies to take calculated risks, especially in industry. While they do have targeted controls, these are primarily focused on content and social stability, I think, of censorship, or preventing unrest, not fundamentally impeding industrial innovation.
So control where it matters for the state, but let industry run faster elsewhere.
Pretty much. They often use sandbox periods too, allowing new technologies to grow rapidly, gain scale, before comprehensive regulation truly kicks in. This leads to massive scale deployment, the most visible example probably being widespread facial recognition surveillance. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the outcome seems pretty clear so far. The U.S. leads in cutting-edge AI model development and, crucially, commercialization. Over 60% of global AI venture funding goes to U.S. firms. China leads in deployment scale and what you might call incremental innovation, refining existing ideas, applying them broadly. They dominate patents and academic publications in terms of sheer volume. Europe, by prioritizing that human-centric ethical model, has certainly set a global example for responsible AI. Its AI Act is definitely being studied worldwide as a potential template, but the cost, it appears, at least up to now, is a slower pace of AI product launches and potentially fewer homegrown AI giants emerging.
So Europe has this ambitious AI Act, setting a global standard for responsible AI, but at what cost to its competitive edge? Are we seeing Europe just falling further behind as this act comes into force? Or are there, perhaps, signs of a course correction happening now as of mid-2025?
Well, Europe's AI innovation hasn't markedly accelerated, that's for sure. The numbers still show that. Its share of global AI funding remains stubbornly in the single digits, far below its share of global GDP, for instance. Former ECB President Mario Draghi's blunt assessment back in 2024 really hit home. He stated quite starkly that Europe largely missed out on foundational AI models, calling its ambitions little more than a footnote. Strong words.
Ouch. A footnote, that's harsh.
It is. However, a key trend we're observing right now, and this is crucial for anyone watching the European market, is a distinct softening stance, or at least a pause for reflection on the regulatory front.
A softening, how so?
Well, in July 2025, just recently, a large coalition, 46 top European CEOs representing major players like Airbus, ASML, Siemens, BMW, and even successful AI startups like France's Mistral. They publicly urged Brussels for a 2-year clock stop on the AI Act's most burdensome obligations. They explicitly warned it was disrupting our ability to do business in Europe. That's direct feedback from major industry.
A 2-year pause. That's significant.
Yeah.
How did the EU respond?
EU officials have indicated a willingness to consider adjustments. They've even hinted at pausing implementation if the technical standards needed for compliance aren't ready by the August 2025 deadline. They've also delayed parts of the broader digital regulatory agenda, like the related AI liability law. It really seems like Europe is perhaps feeling its way towards finding a better balance between regulation and actually fostering tech growth, recognizing the initial approach might have overshot slightly on strictness. On the positive side, though, Europe is launching significant public-private initiatives. There's the 20 billion AI gigafactories plan we mentioned, alongside national investment funds from countries like France and Germany trying to boost things domestically. And we have seen genuine success stories, like Mistral AI raising that impressive 105 million seed round. That got a lot of attention.
So some bright spots.
Definitely. And while brain drain is a real concern, let's not forget Europe's strong academic institutions remain a foundational advantage. Globally, though, Europe is perceived dualistically. On one hand, the regulatory superpower setting ethical AI standards, but also in some tech circles, let's be honest, as where tech ideas go to die under paperwork. EU officials are actively trying to counter that negative narrative now.
The significance of that CEO letter and the EU's responsive signals really can't be understated, can it? It strongly suggests the strictest interpretation of the AI Act might indeed soften. So this raises an important question for you, our listener. How will these potential shifts impact your decisions, your strategy in the coming years?
To conclude, I think the evidence so far strongly suggests the EU AI Act has, in practice, slowed innovation in Europe compared to the US and China. The concrete signs are their startups relocating, and the investment disparities we discussed are quite telling. However, and this is key, Europe's actively course-correcting now, or at least signaling a willingness to. It seems to be pivoting from primarily being a pure regulator to also trying to be an enabler of AI innovation. The explicit goal now seems to be avoiding what they term innovation leakage, losing their best ideas and talent elsewhere.
So for you, the tech-focused business leader listening, the key takeaways seem to be remain vigilant and adaptive. Things are fluid. In Europe, maybe engage with regulators, explore those sandboxes or potential exemptions, because the regulatory landscape is clearly shifting, or at least under review. In the US and China, while their environments are currently more lax or perhaps state-aided, recognize that global norms might tighten over time. And Europe's emphasis on ethics, on trustworthy AI, might yet become a significant long-term competitive advantage as customers worldwide increasingly prioritize privacy, transparency, and responsibility. Who knows?
That's the long game potential, yes.
So the big question to consider, maybe mull over after this, is can Europe truly balance achieving world-class AI advancements with its core values? Or will the primary competitive edge in AI development remain, at least in the near term, with those less restrictive environments? As the sources highlight, and it's a good closing thought, the global race for AI is far from over.
Okay.
Thank you for joining the podcast, and see you soon.